Oh, sure. Okay, SonjaSchenk, so hello, thank you for
Hi,
coming.
thank you.
And Sonia, she lives in Long Beach too, but before she was living in Los Angeles, I think. And I have known her for a few years. We met at the Long Beach Open Studio tour, and I visited her studio, and I was very impressed by the large-scale paintings all over her studio. And then after I discovered what she was doing with large-scale installations and
Landscape.
sculptures and on-site projects. So I I thought that it was very interesting because she has done so different things and successful because she has created very different things. But the thing, her inspiration, I think she will explain better than myself what's her inspiration. So I think better if you start now, Sonia.
Okay. Hi, nice to meet you guys. Thank you so much for having me. I hope the audio is good. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, okay. All right, I did prepare some slides so that we could look at images as I speak. So I'm going to share a screen. And let me make sure. Oops. Sorry. I'm usually good at technology, but not so much Zoom. Okay, can you see that? Okay.
Yes, that's good.
Okay, so all right, so now I just want to make it full screen like that. There. Okay, so as Annie said, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm a painter primarily. I would say I'm a painter first, but I also do installation, sculpture, and a long time ago, I actually did video art as well. I kind of don't do that as much anymore, but I've kind of just migrated through. And in a way, sculpture is the most recent. I've only been doing that for about 10 years, I would say. So, so anyway, so while I'm just talking about this part, I selected some like images of not older, but recent work, like in the last 10 years to show you guys. So this is just a big, kind of overview of a bunch of images and paintings. I've been artist in residence at through the U.S. National Park System. This particular piece, I was artist in residence at Cerritos College I guess it's in LA County, the border of LA, Orange County. This was part of a show that I did as part of that residency, as is this installation and painting. This was shown at the Long Beach Museum of Art in their downtown annex. It's like a floor-based painting, a great gift for the impractical. This is part of a series called New Mountain, which is based on the idea of what Los Angeles will look like in the very distant future, like the future. I like to think about large scale time in a large scale, like geologic time. So it's based on the idea of what will happen to the landscape, in billions of years when things like plastic have become part of the world and no longer like a man-made foreign substance. This is a installation called All Broken Up. I did a series of stuff kind of based on the geology of Los Angeles and Southern California, the idea of earthquakes and land movement that exists that we all live with. This is also part of the New Mountain series, the idea of that we could have mountains growing. At some point, mountains sometimes grow, so they might grow here in Los Angeles. Well, this is pretty old, 2013. This is this is called Hoven Weep, and it was kind of based on the idea of what would be our pyramids in the far distant future. Would we, obviously we would have like skeletons of skylines perhaps, but I also thought like the highway system, what would be left of that would be something that would be kind of like a mystery for the future to try to figure out. I'm always thinking about these people that live like way beyond us who can't understand us, kind of like the way that we look at archaeology and try to determine what those people thousands of years or millions of years, well, I think it's more like thousands, but thousands of years ago were doing, like we're always saying this was a religious, an object of worship. We kind of put our culture on theirs. And so I kind of like to think of what people would think about us. This is quite recent, and this is called Cassandra. And it's from about a year and a half ago. So that brings us kind of close to the present. So this is a really large painting that I did this past year. And I wanted to talk about this painting and the kind of the work that I've done around it primarily today. And it's actually like a two-part painting. So this is about 10 feet wide and 6 feet tall. I showed it at the Museum of Art and History last summer at Lancaster in the high desert. And this piece was upstairs and then in an atrium, and then directly below it downstairs is this piece. And the first one is called We Emerge Without a Guide or a Map. And this one is called Antipode of the Sun. And they're designed strangely because they are designed to work separately and together. And here they are together when they're hung right next to each other. And I actually have them hung like that in my studio now because I happen to have one wall that's big enough for this. So it's together it's 12 feet tall and 10 feet wide, which is definitely the biggest painting I've ever done. I'm not a muralist, but it's a kind of mural size, I guess. So I was going to talk about this painting and kind of some of what ideas behind my work that led to it, and a little bit of the process too, since I think we're all painters and artists. So I think I'm always trying to paint what doesn't exist, like ideas that I have or things that I think about that I don't have a reference, like I don't have a visual reference for. And I don't know why this intrigues me so much, but it does. And so the process and the figuring out of how to paint something that you don't know what it looks like or what it is visually is definitely challenging. And for some reason, I love that. So I mean, I'm not gonna say this is a huge inspiration, but Caspar David Friedrich, these paintings of his, of these people and landscapes are kind of, I'd say they're like maybe he was intrigued by some of the same things, perhaps. This is called Monk by the Sea. I think it's pretty famous. Another thing that I think I draw a lot from is science fiction. I just picked these two books. I mean, A Wrinkle in Time was definitely a book that as a child I really loved and probably stared at this cover a lot. And Stranger in the Strange Land, I think there might be some like controversy about it nowadays, but I think it's just kind of old fashioned, maybe like a little sexist, maybe. But but anyway, sci-fi in general, I just really like it. I think my work is a little like sci-fi, except for it's not. But just in that it's dealing with those kind of issues of, the future society, maybe technology, or, what will happen. I mean, I like sci-fi because I think it's a great way that kind of more complicated ideas about philosophy and culture and human existence gets put forth as something that normal people can understand, or like a child can understand, that isn't so intimidating as, say, straight up philosophy or academic writing, and or even religious writing. So it's like a pop culture. I think it's a very sophisticated element of pop culture. So I would not say my work is sci-fi, but it has a lot of the same, it's dealing with a lot of the same things, I think. And this is a Swiss artist named, let's see, I think it comes up. Yeah, Ernst Steiner. And the title is Tree of Life. And he was actually painting, I think he might even still be alive. I think he was born in the 1930s. So his work is not, it looks like it's from, Renaissance Europe, but it's actually much more recent. And so these kind of transcendental or even new age kind of painters, some of the stuff like this kind of mysterious symbolism, I'm kind of intrigued by all of this. This is like the Freemason symbol. You guys probably know it from the dollar bill. The kind of tarot and occult symbols of palmistry, and even Leonardo da Vinci. And this you guys probably have seen maybe at LACMA a couple of years ago, and I saw it at Palm Springs Art Museum in 2020. This is Agnes Pelton, one of her many paintings, and she was one of the transcendentalists who kind of came out of New Mexico, although she's originally from New York and ended up in, I believe, Cathedral City. This is called Winter from 1933, and they're really beautiful. So I think all of these forms that I've just shown, I think, are kind of trying to grapple with some of these same kinds of things that, like, there's no visual referent for that, there's not just like I'm painting an apple, I'm interested in plants, so I'm painting an apple or a bird, although she is painting a bird in this picture. But anyway, so I'm kind of drawing from a lot of these things in my work in this current series, at least. And then I also have, like, I do like to read things like philosophy, and I'm just a big reader. And so this book, I don't know if you guys know it, you probably do. It came out about 10 years ago, 2013. And it was kind of like a trendy philosophy book, which deals with, the ideas of the Anthropocene and ecology, climate change, and how objects on the earth can be looked at. And so all of these things are, they're kind of quasi-religious or quasi-spiritual, but we can talk about them as ontologies, which I guess is most easily, there's a lot of ways to talk about ontology, but you could just say it's a system of belief. Here's some definitions that I got on the internet. And Timothy Morton's book is really indicative of the special kind of ontology called object-oriented ontology, which I was really intrigued by because it's the ideas of creating like a spiritual or metaphysical belief system that does not center on humans. And that, in a time when we have so much so much effect on the planet negatively by humans, it's, if not, something I believe in, it is at least an interesting thought experiment to think about, a spiritual or other belief system that doesn't put us first or us as the only thing that matters. So these are just some kind of things I think about when I'm working, I guess, or when I'm coming up with ideas. So these two paintings, for short, We Emerge and Antipode. Antipode means, I of course find all this stuff by looking things up on Google, and you guys probably know what it means, but it is, the idea when you dig a hole through the earth and you come out the other side, people used to say you could dig a hole to China. That's the antipode of whatever's on the opposite of the sphere is the antipode. So the lower painting of the two that I showed you is called Antipode of the Sun, on the right here. So here they are again, side by side, just to refresh, I guess. And this was the show that it was in at Lancaster. It was a overarching exhibition called Imprints, and each of these artists, including myself, had a solo show within the museum. And mine was the show itself was called Light for the Sun, and then this piece was part of it. Light for the Sun too. So Light for the Sun is a project that I started when I was artist in residence at Shasta Whiskey Town National Park, or National Recreation Area. And this is a version of it, which was these gilded rocks that I sourced these from a quarry outside of Santa Barbara. But so this is the map of Whiskey Town, and it was great. I was given a cabin there. So I don't know if you guys know Northern California or this area, but it's near Redding, and it's not far from Mount Shasta, and it's also not too far from Mount Lassen. And it's kind of like a day use really area. I mean, there are campgrounds and RV parks, but mostly people just come there for the day and, hang out in the lake. And it's a big spot for diving. And part of the reason is because the lake is a lake that was purposely created. It's man-made. It was flooded on purpose to cover the town of Whiskey Town. So Whiskey Town is a gold rush town, and it's under the lake, and people dive there to find gold and also relics from this town. And then also when the price of gold is high, which it is now, people pan for gold in the rivers that feed the lake. And it's got this whole history of gold mining, and I didn't have time to find all the photos, but there's all these, like, the rangers have all these amazing, like, kind of repositories of old gold stamping equipment, and there's gold mines, which I got to go into, which was kind of scary, but so it was just a really interesting place. And so I spent a month there, and also while I was there, I took like side trips to Lassen in particular, which is a volcanic mountain, a mountain that erupted and is the national park, I'm sure you know. And this is just a picture of the creek, and I'm on the right. This is from a video that I did while I was there. So anyway, so I ended up coming up with this kind of question about, it was impossible to be there and not think about gold the whole time. And I think I thought I was going to paint, plein air painting of trees or something, but instead I ended up deciding to figure out a way to put the gold back. And so my project involved gilding with gold leaf these rocks and putting gold veins onto rocks. And I mean, obviously it's kind of a conceptual art project. Here it's on display at a gallery space in Joshua Tree. And so the idea was like kind of a gesture of atonement, for the use of the materials of the earth that we've taken from California, but also maybe a little ironic or humorous because it's just surface, it's gold leaf, it's fake. I mean, it's not fake gold, but it's fake veins. And you can't put it back, right? Like that's kind of the whole point, is that it's a futile gesture. So, so this was kind of the jumping off point for these paintings, was this project, which I'd also showed at that same museum previously. And one of the ideas, one of the things that I learned while I was looking into gold, while at the cabin, was how did gold end up, like, where does gold come from? Is it, just from the center of the earth or what? And it apparently doesn't, I mean, there's some, argument over where it comes from, but apparently it's probably not native to the earth. And most of the gold is on the crust only, which some scientists believe indicates that it came from outer space. And apparently there was like a series of meteor showers that kind of rained down on the earth for years, occurring about 4 billion years ago. And that's the time that the layer of gold that's in the earth is indicative of. So basically it comes from outer space. So I found that fascinating because, I think we would all say, since gold is an element, it's a mineral, I think we would call it organic and natural. But really it's not, or it has become such, because I mean, how long after, how long does it just become part of the planet, right? And so when I think about things like pollution or toxic, just like right now, everybody's talking about plastic so much. Um, at what point does plastic just become the earth, and not a foreign object? Um, this was like some internet illustration of the gold meteor showers. Okay, so these paintings that I created, especially the one on top, We Emerge, has gold leaf in it. They're these kind of like golden, um, I don't know, they're kind of like gems or rocks that are kind of floating around. And I used real gold leaf for that. And then, and I did actually start painting gems, like kind of realistic gems on it. I didn't do very many. I had this idea that it was going to be a lot, but it ended up being just a couple. Um, and then there's some more. And then, and of course, like the other aspect of gold that I was really interested in, or I think maybe just is culturally part of Western culture, is its ties to kind of Christian iconography. And even though I'm a really secular person, obviously I was still raised in Western culture, and I was also raised Catholic. So some of the imagery of kind of Christianity, like cultural Christianity, kind of really seeped into this project, which is kind of weird, but it did. So these are the images of some Byzantine icons and gold leaf. Um, and then this is an Ascension painting from England. This is Ford Madox Brown, the Ascension, 1844. And in general, I think like this kind of Ascension imagery really, it has been showing up in my work, even though like I said, I'm not particularly a religious person. So this one I just found today. I had never seen it, but I think it's pretty cool. Like just how he's kind of really coming from, most of the ones you see are like he's like in, you see the sky, but this one he's literally coming from underground up into the heavens. So this was my painting, which when it's together, there is this aspect of ascension to it, and maybe object-oriented ontology, because it's not a Christ figure, right? It's a piece of the earth. And so clearly the upper painting is the surface, and for whatever reason, I mean, I paint in kind of a weird way. You'll see in a minute when I show you some of the work in progress slides, that I have a pretty experimental process. Like I don't really truly plan things and paint what I plan. I tend to revise a lot while I'm working, and things just kind of appear that I think I should use, like, for whatever reason, rays of light coming out of this rock, which probably is, you know, tied to things I've seen, like some of those imagery, the imagery I showed you earlier, like the all-seeing eye and the eye of Providence, whatever the thing you know, it's like the Da Vinci Code stuff, basically. Um, so, and then the bottom, obviously, it's not dark like this, but it's still underground, or, you know, it could be a quarry, it could be a cave, it could be subterranean. It's not dark, but it is, you know, a surface, an area that does not have a surface or a horizon, right? And there's the imagery that of a rock-like shape that is negative space. There's kind of the element of that. And so some of this is, my studio is in Long Beach. It's in Signal Hill, which is an oil-rich area with lots of oil rigs around. And my previous studio was in Culver City, which is right by Baldwin Hills, which is also full of oil rigs. And I guess certain hilly areas in California just are used for oil rigging. But, you know, part of when I was making this, I was very much thinking about the process of oil and how it is extracted from the earth and not just gold. So these negative space kind of gem-like shapes that are from the underground part are kind of, you know, pretty clearly just representation of what's been taken away. This is a painting sculpture combination. It's not a great photo of it, but from a couple of years ago called Vessel. And it's kind of got that same ascension thing going on, I would say. It's not big. I think this painting is about 24 by 20, maybe. And the piece is about that big, the sculpture piece. So it's kind of like a ruin, but then also like kind of reborn, I guess. I was doing a bunch of kind of these painting sculpture combos at the time. Some were more interesting than others, I guess. Or yeah, so anyway, so it's kind of coming out of a lot of those things. So so I thought I would next talk about some of how the process of actually making this painting went, because it was actually really hard. I think all the big paintings I do are actually really hard. I don't know how many of you guys do larger work, but the, you know, the chance for failure just seems like extremely exponentiated and also more expensive. And, you know, as an artist, obviously that's an issue. Like, I don't want to waste large canvases because they cost, you know, a few $100s each, and also the time and everything to make one. So I've kind of learned over the years to like really to be able to like fix or change or adjust works in progress. So this painting, or these two paintings, started as pretty rough. Well, first, I tend to write a lot. So I'll just write ideas, sometimes like this, like lists, sometimes like longhand writing. And a lot of what I do comes out of thinking and writing. And then in this case, I was drawing some imagery like this, which looks maybe a little familiar. This is like a kind of supposed to be like a site, like a dig site, like an archaeological dig site. Um, this another ascension-y thing, sun, moon, I don't know what it is. Anyway, so like the sketches are like not even close to like what the idea is, but it is, or it's close to the idea, but it's not close to the imagery, I guess. So at some point I started, in this case, and I do this a lot actually, I started making digital mock-ups because I like a reference when I'm painting. I don't like to paint from my imagination. And I also, in this case, I was making this piece for the museum, they asked me to paint something for the show. So it wasn't like they came and picked something out of the studio that existed. So here's like, I won't like talk about all this. They're just like tons of mock-ups that I made. I had this file that I called like the rock maker, and I would just like make different versions of it. And you know, I'd be like, that one's cool, and that one's cool. And then, you know, I'd keep changing it and then try to see how it would fit in this space. And then do some more, you know, and at some point I kind of came down to this one, something like this, I thought. And I also realized that it had to be separated. You know, I realized that it had to work together and apart because I wanted it to work together, but at the museum it would actually be upstairs and downstairs and totally separate. So each painting had to stand alone, and I wanted them to be connected when I installed that way. So I was kind of, you could see like some of these, you know, they're separate and some are together. And eventually I kind of dialed in the colors kind of like this. And that was kind of where I started. And, you know, it looks cool like as a digital, I mean, I don't make digital art like this. Like this to me, I like how this looks, but I would never like show this as like a work of art. And the reality is nothing I paint ever looks remotely like this. So it's kind of weird, but anyway, so then this is some of the process of the upper painting. So there's the top image, and I started drawing, you know, drawing it. It doesn't look that impressive, but this is like 10 feet wide. Um, and then it started looking kind of like this. And I tend to work with tinted gesso a lot as underpainting. So this is all tinted gesso, acrylic tinted gesso. And then, you know, I started changing the drawing, right? Because I decided it was too wide. And then I changed the mock-up, and it's like this back and forth with digital and analog. So now there's like a skinnier one. And this one's based on the drawing I did on the canvas. And I have learned the hard way that like a small outline like this, a simple outline, I mean, I think I can tell really early on whether this would be like a good painting or not. And I think if you can see a good painting with just like this sketchy little scribbly drawing, then you're fine for your huge painting. And in this case, I didn't think it wasn't working for me. And this wasn't either, but I ended up with this shape kind of. Um, I also do like a ton of studies. So along the way, I'll like hit, this is kind of this is all the tinted gesso here. This is the background. I'll hit like a wall, right? Like I'll get to like this point and I'm like, well, now it looks pretty good. The background's kind of filled in. And but what color is it going to be? And like how am I really going to paint this? You know, like this thing in the center. And so you can see this table to the left. I've got all these jars of tinted gesso that I've been making as I'm painting this. Like half the time I'm spending just mixing paint. And then I'm starting to make these little smaller paintings just to try things out. And like this one in the back is like a mini me. Those are each like 8-inch by 10-inch. And then the one on the left is like not a, it's to scale, but it's a tiny piece of the big image. And there's all these color tests on the bottom and stuff. So that's the mini one and the to scale one. And so I just start, you know, every time I hit a problem in the big painting, I go do some little painting like these. So, you know, I don't do them really unless I have to, but you know, when I don't know how it's going to work, I just start making these small studies while doing the main painting. Um, so at some point I realized I get it to like here, and I realized I need more information to paint the thing in the middle. And it looked nice to me, those black areas, but I didn't want to paint it like the mock-up in the end at full scale. So I had all these images of rocks from most of these are from Mount Lassen. I mean, this is all Mount Lassen right here. So they're like great rock formations from the destruction of the volcano 100 years ago. So I just started building the shape out of rocks. And now it's kind of got like a real referent that I could like really, for me, this is something that would be like super fun to paint, you know? And I think I was aiming for this color, but then when I'm working, you know, it's kind of hard to see and stuff. This was like the one for that I needed to see the detail. So I start at it, right? So um, I made a video that does a time lapse. Let's see. So there it is. I mean, it doesn't look that hard. It looks like pretty linear once you see it all together like that, but it really did not feel like a linear process at all. Um, it also is kind of funny to me to see how bad it looks at some points, but I think, I mean, in the end, I'm happy with it. But and so the way it's painted, the centerpiece is obviously oil, and all the outside stuff is acrylic or tinted gesso. And then the one on the bottom is the opposite. Um, so there it is, kind of finished at least. And this one, meanwhile, this one's like languishing. It looks like this, right? And and then I had to go back to the drawing board on it because now that I changed the other one, it didn't work anymore. And here's the video for this one. I photograph obsessively. If you can't tell, I take photos every day. So each of these is probably a day. I mean, I didn't like the painting itself didn't take that long to paint. It I mean, all the work that goes into it took a long time, but the actual process for both paintings was about 2 months, the hardcore painting part. So probably each of those photos is just a different day, and maybe there's a few missing, but this one, I just put this up because I think it's hilarious because it's a point where I was like, what are you, you know, this was like maybe day, you know, when you look at the slide, I mean, the time lapse too, it's easy to forget this is like 10 feet wide. So each of those days where it's like totally changing is like painting this whole thing, like painting a wall, you know? And at some point it started looking like this. And I was like, it looks like Africa with like lasers and a record turntable. I'm like, this is like not gonna work out. Anyways, I just think it's kind of funny. Um, so together they came out, you know, looking a little more polished than that, I think. And here this is my shoe. I'm like contemplating my work, which I do, of course. I think probably everybody does that. I just sit and stare at it and try to figure it out. And then I start like for no reason, just hanging it at, like next to each other, switching it around, which I, oh, and this, I just thought you would want to see maybe. This is my tiny monitor cart, which I'm painting off a monitor, a lot of it, because of the digital imagery. So I have one of those IKEA carts that everybody has, and I have my computer monitor on it with like a 20-foot cable. Um, anyway, so, and what you can't really tell, it looks like my studio is massive, and it is big in my opinion, but part of it really is like just a hallway. So this part like here where these stairs are is really like this kind of, it's like a wide hallway, but it's still really just a hallway. So um you know, it's not like there was this tons of room there to paint, so I was having to move it back and forth on the wall and stuff the whole time. um anyway, so here's the bigger one again, the top one again, and the bottom, and the two together, so you can see. And that's it. There's me for scale. And that's how it looks right now. And then on the studio wall. This was how it looked at the museum. I didn't photograph the bottom one well, which is stupid. And this is just a bad iPhone photo. I actually just emailed them today if they would send me better pictures, and they are, but I didn't think to ask for it until right before this talk. And yeah, so the future, I don't know. I mean, no one knows what the future will hold, right? But I've been working on, I have some new things I'm thinking about, some writing, and these are some details of the painting I'm working on right this second. I have no idea how it's going to turn out. It's 6 feet by 5 feet. These are just kind of a portion of it. But the surprise element is that it includes a figure. So there. Um, I haven't painted a figure in a long time, although I used to. Any questions?
I have a question. If you can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So you use a lot of tinted gesso, right?
Yes. As underpainting mostly. Yeah.
Do you, does it come that way, or do you tint your own gesso?
Yeah, I do it myself. Yeah, I use regular acrylic paint to tint the gesso. So,
And why does that, I'm just curious why you use that instead of just using, you know, acrylic paint?
yeah, that's a really good question. It's well, it started just as I would tint the gesso and do the whole canvas like a tinted color. And in fact, this canvas, you can't really tell, but it's because it's mostly covered up, but it's tinted like a kind of pale peachy color. Um, and it was because I got sick of having all those little white areas that you had to fill in, you know, and like little white specks showing through. So I just thought if I painted the canvas like a color, but I could get away without having to work so hard to clean it up. But it also, you know, I wanted it to be matte like gesso. I really like a matte absorbent surface to paint on. And gesso is really matte and absorbent, and acrylic paint is not usually. So, um, and there is a little more danger of the oil paint not sticking well to the acrylic if you use true pure acrylic as underpainting. At least so I've heard. I haven't had any problem with it, but yeah, so it just gives me kind of like a matte blank way to do the underpainting, and then I can paint over it in oil or leave some of it exposed like I did in the one that we've been talking about today. I mean, that one I wanted the the center rock to really stand out from the background, and actually in the bottom one, um it's kind of hard to tell in pictures, but the black part in the bottom one is also gesso. That's like store-bought black gesso. But so it's very matte. And then the oil paint is not super shiny, but it is kind of shiny. So it has a really different, you know, it doesn't show photos, but it has really different texture, I guess, or sheen or whatever.
I really like that matte. Yeah, I mean, when you were showing the gesso, I really like that matte. And then, so I was wondering, like on the top one, did you
yeah.
paint over all of the gesso, or did you leave some of it matte with the contrast of the black?
Yeah, like on the top one, the whole background is the acrylic tinted gesso. Um,
So you just
that's
left it, you didn't go and
I
paint
left it.
over it. Yeah, it looks great. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
Yeah.
really beautiful. Yeah, I like that a
thank
lot.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it like
Question.
I oh sorry, I ended up like I kept changing the background a little bit. Like it wasn't big changes, they were more subtle, but I was working on it the day that they picked it up, but I was like, thank God this is acrylic, you know, like
Question for you. For your small pieces, I wonder, do you ever use watercolor? Because it looks like there's a lot of intermingling of colors and transparency and all that that makes
yeah.
it ideal for watercolor.
You know, I use ink a lot. I use like,
Oh,
I use
alcohol
ink
ink.
on paper a lot. And you know, it is really transparent. I'm like a very thin painter, like the
It's
oil paint that I
beautiful.
paint is thin. So, I mean, some of it's thick, but mostly it's thin. So, yeah, it doesn't have a lot of texture to it. It's just, it is more like watercolor. Yeah. And I think that's why I
Lovely.
like the matte surface is I want it to be kind of absorbent like paper, you know? Yeah,
I
I love
like
that.
it. It's really nice. The bottom
Thanks.
one is so beautiful too.
I have a question. When you do these, you were talking about, found it interesting that you reflected back to the illuminated manuscripts with the gold. And I right off had this feeling of an ascension, even though you say you're secular, but I had this sense, my gosh, look, I see this like looking from down at earth, looking up and then emerging on the top. And I just thought, you know, a lot of your inspiration, but you seem to get a lot of inspiration just from the natural world and mountains and rocks and such. But
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting. I sort of see a combination of those two factors. I feel like some areas you can read as a void or you can read as a positive space, which I think is really a beautiful kind of interaction between your pieces.
Thank you. Yeah, I think
I just
oh,
wondered,
sorry.
to get that really glowing feeling, is that like from a lot of the underpainting or is that just paint applied? I
I mean,
feel
it's paint
lower
applied. Like well, like you mean at the bottom or the top or
both, but the bottom, especially with these little reddish glowing areas, I just wondered how you achieve that. If it's like through the underpainting and on what you layer over, or is it just basically the color that you lay on?
it's actually painted over. It's actually straight oil paint. Um, just using oil colors to make it, it's like to make it look transparent, but it isn't at all transparent.
Very beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like those areas. You know, actually the bottom one, interestingly, I did put silver leaf on it and it's there, but I ended up it was just really it was so bright and in a way I just thought it was too much. So I ended up kind of just kind of tinting it over with oil paint and like coloring it the same as kind of as the background. So in real life you can see it more, but it doesn't read as silver. It's just kind of metallic-y looking.
Well, I love the fact you can read it as a rock, which is a really solid form, but then it's transparent. So it's just a beautiful play between what's solid and what's not. I think it's really
That's cool.
Yeah.
Contrast. Yeah, it's so beautiful. What is your
Thank you.
favorite subject to paint, Sonja?
Well, some people call me the rock lady. But you know what? Actually, I was obsessed with painting people for years. I was really obsessed with
Oh,
painting portraits, actually. And sometimes I think like the rocks are like a stand-in for a body or a, you know, a subject, like a, you know, like a person or, you know, I don't know. Obviously, they have the monumental quality that I really like. Um, but and I also like how I just think they're mysterious because they're so unlike us. You know, they're like the opposite of a human being. They they're inert. They last indefinitely, as far as we know. They, you know, they just are like. I think they're a good symbol for me of like just all the stuff we can't possibly understand ever.
nice.
The unknown.
Very beautiful.
Sonia, would you like to unshare your screen?
Sure. Yes. See if I can find my
Sonia,
mouse.
can I ask a question about the leafing? You have to wait
Yes.
until the paintings are perfectly dry before you leaf, is that correct?
Yeah, so the leaf I did before I did the oil painting. So it was
Oh,
only
before.
it's actually when I did the leaf, the gold leaf is on top of the gesso. I actually kind of figured out in advance where I wanted the leaf to go and made sure it was on a kind of really minimally painted surface. So
Is that so it would adhere better?
yeah, yeah.
Can you gold leaf over oil painting?
I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, the little studies I did do it over oil, or I just wasn't careful on those. I just kind of slapped it on. But they're still holding up fine, but it's only been a year or less. So I think the risk is there that it would come off, you know, or maybe, yeah, there's a risk of that, I would say.
Do you then have to protect the gold leaf or the silver leaf with something so that you're not getting paint on it? Or are you just careful painting around it?
Yeah, just careful painting. Yeah. Yeah, the cool thing about gold is you don't really have to protect it at all. Like those rocks that I showed you, I still have them and they're, they don't have anything on them and they're, it doesn't really, it's 24 karat gold. I mean, you could get different grades of gold leaf, but that particular leaf is 24 karat. And, it's the reason why we all love 24 karat gold. It just stays beautiful and shiny and doesn't degrade.
I love those rocks. Those are fabulous. They're really cool.
They are just beautiful.
I have a comment. I noticed that in my mind, I see X-ray of the earth.
You're cutting
down
off,
below
Lynn.
with the jewels going around, with the pardon?
Your sound is
It's really interesting to me. I mean, it's the anatomy that I look at, that I see in your work.
Yeah, I think like all this stuff of our culture gets into our heads. It comes out when we make art, whether we want it to or not, it's just part of life. I think like part of being human is to assimilate from others, one way or the other, whether you notice it or not, or just do it without thinking,
It is lots of things. I like it.
Love it. Love your pre-study, what you think about before you start painting. It's making me think a lot now because I think about how the future generations will look at what we've left behind also. So your work is just giving me a gateway, to explore. It's just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's our job as artists, right? Like we're not just speaking to today and this moment. We're speaking in theory. We don't know what's going to last or not last, but it might be that our work is sitting like Caravaggio or Leonardo or whatever, and people are looking at it and trying to figure out what we were thinking, and looking our message to the future, kind of.
Right. Wow.
I think it's also kind of interesting when you were talking about you do the digital mock-ups, and I was thinking, because you don't think of that, that's not going to be your work. You would never show that. And I was also thinking down the future, you kind of wonder what our future holds in terms of how people are going to see art. Is it going to be in a digital format, or now they're talking about quantum, different types of computers that are not even digital. It's like, okay, it's like, where are we going to head? It's very interesting to think that way, what's ahead for us and how we experience art.
Right.
I think it's important that we look at, with AI and everything that's happening now, that we look at how we want to live, like as humans. Do we want to live like attached to screens and attached to computers? I mean, I like to me, the physical act of painting is so much more rewarding than the computer work. The computer work is like, I kind of a necessary evil or something. I mean, it's like a chore that I have to do it, but and it's certainly saving me time and stuff, but I would much rather be in the real world,
Yeah, exactly. With something tactile and real in front of you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's interesting how I see the youth, growing up, and how talk about being in front of screens just continually for what they do for their work. It's just sort of, you know, thinking, are they going to have that real life experience, tactile experiences, even interpersonal ones that we have today, if that's in the future? It's kind of an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Does she have a studio that she works, or she work in her garage, or where do you do your work?
Oh, I have a studio. Yeah, it's a warehouse, a small warehouse in Long Beach. Yeah.
So there's with other people too?
Yeah, I've been running small studios for 15 years now, but yeah, so I have 3 other artists that rent space from me, and we do the Long Beach Open Studio Tour every year, which is how I met Annie. And we do a happy hour every spring, which we're going to do pretty soon. So I don't know if any of you guys are nearby, but you could definitely come. It's going to be on April 27th. And it's just like a kind of open house, you know, early evening on a Sunday. And yeah, we do a couple events, and it's nice. It's really nice. I think when I was young, I always thought I would want my own private studio, but the reality is that it's nice to have other artists around.
So you do that every day?
Paint?
Every day?
I paint a lot. Yeah. I mean, almost every day. I have like the ink stuff I do at my house, and the oils I do at the studio. And I pretty much come over here every evening from I'm kind of a night worker. So I come over here every evening at like 6 or 7. And I mean, I'm here now. These are like my storage racks. I stay till like 9 or 10 or 11. And yeah.
So you're not too far from where you live?
No, it's really close. It's like less than 3 miles. It's great. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I used to live in Venice for a long time, and I had the studio in Culver City, which isn't that far. It's only like 6 miles, but it was definitely more of a slog to get in and out of Venice than this. This is no complaints.
Well, my studio was in Venice, and
Oh, really?
and they closed the building and then knocked it down. So
Yeah, mine got sold. And it didn't get knocked down though, surprisingly, which even the old landlord thought it was a tear down, but they turned it into like a kind of fancy co-working space kind of thing or whatever. I don't know what it is, but modern office, basically.
So have you been working large for many years? I mean, was it a process to build up to that size? I mean, it's so physical to work large.
It is. Yeah. I always liked it. Like in college, I started doing really big, just oil paintings on paper, like butcher paper. And then I would just like tape them together and make them big, you know? And yeah, I just always wanted, I mean, if I worked smaller, it was probably because I didn't have the space or couldn't afford the supplies. Um, but yeah, I always feel like constrained on like a smaller canvas. And I just like the freedom of all that space to paint.
and you don't have to buy a frame.
Yeah.
That's true. Nobody cares about that frame.
You just have to buy lots of canvas.
So you sign your name on the back all the time or something? I never see your name.
On the back, yeah.
On the back?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Some people don't like that, but I showed you a little bit. I have the worst handwriting. I don't sign my name the same way every time. It's just like this scrawl, but it's like different scrawls. Like it's terrible. You'd think someone who could draw could write, but I can't write.
So you used to do people in the beginning, you got tired of that, and now you're doing more abstract.
Yeah, I think I was doing like these I thought they were conceptual paintings, but nobody I felt like nobody understood them because they were more taken by the faces and the people. So I just stopped. But now I'm kind of doing it again, but it's not as portrait-y, I guess. It's just more, a little more like a person is part of the landscape as opposed to, you know, like a real portrait, which is what I was kind of doing before.
Were they realistic before?
Pretty realistic, yeah. About as realistic as this. I mean, like I think parts of that rock are realistic, but even if it's not a real real life image, right? But yeah, pretty realistic. I don't have any handy. Like there's some right there probably on the shelf, but
Can I ask, on your installations where you have these rocks, and they look like they were floating.
oh yeah,
what are they made of and how do you go about that?
those are like plaster, like a thin layer of plaster with polystyrene. So they're like really light and they're just hanging with fishing line. And I have some big ones. They're like I have one piece that's about 25 feet long and it looks like a giant broken highway and it's really light, like also just hangs with fishing line. And now I'm working on, I don't know that it'll get it, but I'm working on a proposal for the harbor that's like, it will be a real, if it gets made, it's like a real cement, like giant piece that won't be lighted also.
Like on that pyramid of concrete, broken up concrete. Was that a painting or was that dimensional?
That was a painting. Yeah. Yeah, that was a really realistic painting. Yeah. Yeah. It was like a mountain of canvases on the wall, kind of a mountain of broken highway. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting seeing your work, and then I was trying to work that out too. Is that like a real sculpture? Is that a painting of a rock? It's kind of interesting when you see it out of context. And here it's a painting. I was trying to work that out as I was watching, as I was looking at your pieces.
Yeah, one of them was actually sculpture. That was the suspended one. Yeah, that one was, but yeah, most of those were painting. I was kind of sticking to painting because I know this is a painting group really. So I put a couple of sculptures in, but not too many.
When you're having shows, do you get feedback from your viewers? Your shows are mostly in a gallery setting?
Mostly in like institutions, like museums or college galleries, places like that. Yeah, yeah, I get a lot of feedback, and the cool thing is I think that it seems like people kind of get it, like even just regular people, you know what I mean? Not just other artists or students or curators or whatever, but people who are I guess when I was in Culver City, we did the Culver City Art Walk, which used to be like massive amounts of people coming through the studio and mostly just from the neighborhood back then. And people would just look at it and like scratch their head and like kind of, you know, they wouldn't like, yeah, they weren't worried about what you thought about what they were saying. So you got
Debbie. Do you want to talk to her?
The unvarnished truth.
Who is it?
Hello.
Turn your sound off.
Sonja, we're past our hour, and we thank you for the presentation.
What is
Does anyone have Esther, please?
Oh, she's
please
gonna come
unmute
out.
yourself.
A Passover.
Esther, shut off your sound.
Anyway, does anyone else have a question?
Yeah, where did you go to school?
You want to call her?
No.
Yeah, I went to I went to UC San Diego and studied art. I have a BFA from UC San Diego, which was I thought it was an amazing program when I was there. The head of the department was Alan Capro, And it was like all these New York artists. And I grew up in, you know, Orange County, like Long Beach area. And to end up in like a kind of New York, escape from New York people in San Diego was, I thought, a pretty lucky circumstance for me.
A happy accident.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know I was going to get that or have any expectation of it, but it was awesome.